What up, though? This your brother Mike X.
My killers got them suits on like followers of Farrakhan.
And welcome to the 17 Winners Podcast, the realest podcast in the game.
I'm the jig in my city, yeah. I'm not saying they not good, nah. I'm just saying I'm the realest. Facts.
And this episode of 17 Winners, man, I got a good one for y'all today. This is a unique guy, man. So today we are sitting with Adam Grant, the executive director of A Brighter Way, a nonprofit organization that is essentially dedicated to reentry, assisting those who are formerly incarcerated come back home and get back into society. Like, is there such thing as like normal? Are we saying like live a normal life?
A thriving life. We believe in quality of life in A Brighter Way.
I like that. So with that, just him even speaking up right there, you know, this guy is no joke. So man, I guess I give you a second to just tell him a little bit about you that I didn't say,
Okay.
And then we'll get into our conversation.
I guess the big thing behind it is, you know, what I do now is a product of what I did before. And what I did before had me do 27 years for a bank robbery on my B prefix, 2 years on my A prefix. I don't even remember what the charges were. I stole cars and tore it up. I don't remember what I ended up pleading no low contend rate to.
Okay.
And a year and a half in the county. So you guys can't see me right now, but I look good, but the numbers do match up. I'm 54 years old and I got over 30 years of incarceration. So
Real OG status for real. I think you might be the most certified OG that I've had on the show, bro. Like, you've been around the corner, you've been around the block.
I've been here for a minute.
So yeah, I guess I want to get. It's always hard for me to start because the objective of the podcast is to kind of exemplify the success stories, or not necessarily even the success stories, but just highlight the fact that after prison, life isn't over, right? You're not stuck in that hole of prison after you've gotten out of there, because I came through, I survived, and I'm thriving, right? Like you said in the beginning. And I like to start talking about all of the great things you're already doing.
Right.
But I also have to get in from the beginning of like kind of how we got here.
Okay. A little bit about my journey.
Yeah, man. And to some people, it could be, I guess, traumatic to even have to go back through it. For myself, I consider this podcast to be like therapy for me. It allows me to kind of talk through it with people who relate in one way or another. So that being said, I mean, I guess, all right, for what's happening since this the new year, what's happening right now, and then we'll go back into your story a little bit. So like what's going on for A Brighter Way and for you yourself this year?
For A Brighter Way, we are finally actually able to really start getting into transitional housing. In Washtenaw County, Ypsi specific, which is a big deal. We were renting a house at one point in time, but as a renter, you can't do the same things you can as an owner. You have to be more risk averse. So we weren't able to put everybody that we wanted to into the previous house. We own it now, so if people want to, you know, break the pitchforks and stuff out, then so be it, but it's ours. We can take the slings and arrows. I don't think we're going to get that many because, you know, what we do is real and we try and be the best neighbors on the block. So we'll be snow blowing the sidewalks and mowing lawns. Have the whole
neighborhood looking.
Ain't no doubt. I mean, because that's one of the messages that we're trying to send to people is that we're not just formerly incarcerated. We're members of the community. We care about more than just criminal justice. We care about the school districts. We care about, you know, how our streets look, things like that. So we're just trying to get people to just look at it as who we are. We're people. Taking it back further in the idea of sharing one story. I mean, I find it therapeutic too. And I've also, you know, come to terms with a lot of it because I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have the life that I have without all of that. Right. So people ask, you know, don't you have regrets? Well, of course, I have one regret. And that one regret is that people got hurt. How I got to where I got to, the life that I got now, I don't have no regrets for having to do all that time. Well, I did in the middle of it. You know,
for sure.
Ain't no doubt.
For sure.
And so to bring you back to the beginning of the reentry journey, I'm from Lansing too. So I came home to Lansing January 8th of 2020.
Okay.
After doing 27 straight. I got my license in about 3 weeks. I came home to a good situation. I didn't come home to OS, have to hit the ground running. I did hit the ground running in a lot of ways to get things set up. But I didn't have to get a job immediately. She was my fiance at the time. I gave her 1.5 years to run. She didn't. She's official now. She's been my wife for 3 years now.
Yes, sir.
But I got my license.
1.5 years to run.
Yeah, I gave her 1.5 years to run. She can't go nowhere now. She's stuck.
Yes, sir.
But I drove to Humanity for Prisoners in the middle of a snowstorm to do a promo for Humanity for Prisoners because I knew this was the kind of work that I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to get into it. And if everybody remembers what March of 2020 looked like, that's when COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd got my first 2 jobs. At the same time, I was working 3rd shift part-time for Holy Cross at the shelter. And I was working full-time canvassing for the Elliott Larson Act. So I was out on the streets as COVID was starting to ramp up. I'd already got a promotion. I was on my 2nd week. I'd already got a promotion to field coordinator. And I think it was that Thursday I was in front of Secretary of State and they locked the doors because of COVID. They weren't letting anybody else into the building, and you watched people trickle out as they finished their appointments. And then Friday I was canvassing on Michigan State's campus, and they closed down Michigan State's campus. And so then it got real because on Sunday they closed down the company. They were like, "We're not doing. There's no more canvassing." And I had to decide whether or not I wanted to work in the shelter because the shelter really got.
Sure.
It really got more like a police job. Like you can't let people out to smoke a cigarette after 8 o'clock. And it was like, that's touching on my traumas. You can't tell me that. Yeah. So
telling people what they can and can't do is like
right, and enforcing it. That was the other thing too. Okay, I can tell you what the rules are.
Like then what?
Right. So both those jobs came to an end, but thankfully before I left prison, I became a certified peer recovery coach, and so that was at least marketable. And when the whole world was trying to figure out how to work remotely, the world opened up to me because we're limited.
Bro, I talked about the pandemic like amongst like people that also have been to prison versus talking about it with people who work. Those of us who had been to prison wasn't really tripping.
No.
It was like, all right, we on lockdown at the joint.
Right.
Let me figure something else to do to occupy my time. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a big deal. While the world was going crazy, we were kind of like chilling,
right,
figuring it out.
Right.
Because a lot of us seem to have like jumped up. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I told my wife, I said I got because she's in the house with me. Mm-hmm. I got the best bunkie I've ever had. I got a refrigerator
full of everything that I want to eat,
and I got to be a hero to my family because everybody was scared to go out. Man, I'm going everywhere. Exactly. I come back mighty hunter with a big thing of toilet paper because toilet paper was not on the shelves forever. It was like it was easy to succeed out here, and I had that conversation with a lot of people too because they were talking about lockdown. And I was like, this ain't a lockdown. And I was doing
go outside my house.
And I was doing podcasts in Australia, in Britain. And I mean, it was like the world was my oyster.
Right.
So it's like I'm not limited. I can't go to Ohio, but I can do a podcast all the way across the globe.
Yeah, that's wild. Bro, so I guess I get there when I get there because I don't want to get too far into your reentry, right? Right. That is a big part of the story as well. Mm-hmm. Since I got a kind of general idea and gave the listeners a general idea like what's going on and how you got to that point, how did we get here? Because at the beginning you said you did a 2-year and then you ended up doing 27. So how did we get into the lifestyle at all? I like to talk about like the then the experience, and then after. So like, how'd you get there?
Well, a lot of people would look at me and think I'm one of those accidental tourists to prison. I mean, you kind of see me now, bald-headed white guy in his mid-50s, and I clean up pretty well. I can travel in any circle. But that wasn't my life. I mean, I did my first armed robbery at 12. And I was a stick-up kid. I've earned my way to prison.
Are you from here? You from Lansing?
I'm from Lansing.
Straight up.
Yeah, I used to. The main place that I lived was over on Clifford, right behind Hunter Park.
Okay.
Yeah, and I lived over here on Chestnut for a while, and that's when in my real, wild days. I mean,
Sure.
in the early '80s on the west side, it wasn't no joke. There was a curfew, and I used to go out and walk every night because I'm like, telling me what I can do.
Where do you think that rebellious spirit come from?
Probably from my dad and even my family's side. If you go into some of these things are genetic, some of these things are kind of, the nature and nurture thing. There's actually 3 books written on my dad's side of the family called The Shelton Gang, The Shelton Boys. And when Al Capone had some real work to put in, he would call in the Shelton Boys from Southern Illinois, and they'd come in and put work. So, like even my family lineage, there was no in between. There was a bunch of lawyers and there was a bunch of gangsters.
Well, America loves a successful criminal, right? They love a gangster that's like good at it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I wasn't one of those, but my family was. I mean, I was not a good one because I didn't. It was a little bit of like self-flagellation, like I was trying to beat myself up. It's almost like I wanted to get caught a lot of times. I would do things really brazen. I didn't wear masks. I didn't do any of that. I mean, it was almost like I was on a suicide mission. I was a little bit kamikaze-ish. It's kind of what I was known for.
At 12 years old, bro, how did you develop? Like, why was you so tough?
I don't know. I mean, similar story to a lot of people. Born to a 15-year-old mother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so
that puts some things there. She's got some pressure. She's divorced by 17, married to somebody else by 18.
Damn, 15 and married, man. Like that was back in the day.
And 18 and married twice.
Okay.
And then 7 years after that, divorced again. So by the time I'm 8, I've seen some stuff, and I've also been some stuff. Because my mom and I have had a conversation recently that, because she's mom, she took a lot of responsibility for things, and it was like, no, you were a kid trying to be a kid. I told her one time, I said, you were an awesome big sister.
Not ready to be a mom yet.
No, but she's an awesome mom now. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's cool. She's an amazing grandmother. So that was a part of it. And a part of it was just, like I said, something about those genetics to the way that I responded to things. I was okay until 12, and then my grandfather passed away. And I don't know what that did. You couldn't tell it on the surface, but it clicked something on me internally. And I became another person, and I became the mission guy. I came, we're gonna go do something. Let's go holler at Dino. You know what I'm saying? Because that was my nickname. Because I used to get to run in my mouth like.
Well, listen, I relate to that because I had like a similar story. That's what made me question where the tough came from. Because mine came from like a false toughness. Mine was more of a trauma response to like preventing things from happening to me.
Sure.
I was like kind of a smart kid, smart enough to see like if you're weak or if you seem weak,
right,
you're gonna get messed over. And if you are a little stronger or a little more aggressive, they're likely to leave you alone. So that became, but eventually I got addicted to what I feel like was the respect or the rush of being the Dino, the one that they call A. Let's go do it. We know O gonna do it because my nickname was O.
Right.
Hold on.
There you go.
So like they knew I was with it, just like you. So that's I feel you. I feel you for sure on that.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's just addiction. I think that like when it is born of let me keep people at a distance so that I'm safer that way, you get addicted to the distance. And being that hard ass, being the person that people, think about whether or not they take that next step with,
100%.
creates one more layer of safety. And so, I mean, I'm about as emotionally available as an individual as you'll find these days. Everybody jokes about it. They invite me to events so that I'll cry because I get touched.
Yeah, right. When the first
stuff.
couple times we met, because it takes a few times before we actually know each other, right? First couple times we met, I heard you say something about crying, or either that or actually saw you cry. I was like, who the hell is this guy?
Right.
Like,
because I went from being so sectioned off from my feelings to part of my transition of becoming a full human being was being overly in touch with my feelings. And so now I'm just I'm okay. I'm a cough drop person.
Okay.
Not like in the hole. I can't use halls anymore. I can only use the
Oh.
But that's a whole other
section.
For all those guys listening that have been there,
your homeboy go to the hole. He gonna tell you, man, send me a couple packs of halls and maybe a pack. Back in the day, it was a cigarette pack. Send me a couple pouches or something.
Man, when I went to prison on my A prefix, when you went to the hole, they gave you a pouch of tops.
Straight up.
They gave you a pouch.
You remember your number?
208-274. Never forget it. I always say it's a number I'll never forget. Nobody else will ever remember.
Number I'll never forget. Nobody else will ever remember.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. I asked that question on the podcast to see if people still remember, if it's burned into them the way it's burned into me. For me, it is 358-565, right? Yep. I don't think I'll ever forget it. I enjoy the idea of living and being free and long enough to forget it.
Right.
But I don't expect to actually forget it.
I did forget my 5-year anniversary of my release, which was 2 days ago. My wife remembered it because Google Photos brought up our first selfie that we shared with her mom. And today actually happens to be my 3-year anniversary off parole. And remember, 1982 was the first time I got involved with the criminal legal system. Didn't get off until 2022. So I was either on probation, parole, or incarcerated 40 years.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah.
Damn.
You ain't got to rub that in, right?
Damn. Right? My bad. My bad.
You ain't got to rub that in.
Damn, that was deep, though.
Yeah.
So what's the best thing about life right now?
How do you even pick something out of so many blessings? I mean, we talked last night on our Q&A about approach. And my approach to life is that everything is amazing. Everything is, they say stop and smell roses, but my nose don't work. My nose stopped working for about the last 12 years of my bit, but I'm thankful for it because I was in pole barns. I didn't want to smell all that.
Yeah.
But I stop and smell the roses on a regular basis. Every single day, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the struggles that I have because these are struggles that I was built for, and they lead to something. So the things that I'm most grateful for. My wife is my person. So I'm so grateful to have her, and she gets me.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you don't see her a lot in these things because she's got other things to do, but she keeps me strong, and she allows me to do these things. She's not constantly pulling me back and saying, oh, no, you can't go to this.
That's important.
Man, I put 140,000 miles on my car since I've been home. She lets me go out and put work in.
Yes, sir. That's important for the woman that's with you, that's your partner. I guess the person that's your partner to be supportive of the way that this became a passion for you, right? Because I'm the same with my fiance. When I got to go out to U of M tomorrow, and I was trying to figure out a way to make sure I can bring the It was like, go, work. Like, what do you?
Right.
You don't need to bring me, but part of my thing is I got to bring it all with me. I got to carry it all. So yeah, I can definitely appreciate.
Which is a strong compulsion for a lot of us who are motivated when we come home.
Yeah.
They're different people. I mean, I'm not saying everybody falls into the category that we do, but when you're extremely motivated, you do feel a compulsion to do all the things. And sometimes that's when people will crash and burn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't need to do all the things, but I need to do as many as I can.
Right. I need to occupy my time. An idle mind is a devil's workshop.
And be productive. Because I found busy don't work for me.
No,
productive is. I have to see something at the end of it. I joke my wife works puzzles. You know, I say I do man puzzles. Puzzles that when I'm done with it, there's a cabinet in front of me or something like that.
I don't want to just see it. I want to be able to use whatever I got done working.
Right. I think a lot of those things, but my wife was uniquely prepared for this because how we met gave her a good understanding of who I was even when I was in there. She did my last 11 years with me.
Straight up.
Last 11 years. And it was because her cousin came to prison and had a serious suicide attempt, and they weren't sure, whether or not he was going to be able to survive. And he came to Kenross, where I was at, and he got involved in the classes that I was doing, and he kept writing home saying, Taz said this. That was my other nickname,
It's
Taz.
funny that you say that because I was going to ask, how was your time in prison for the last 11 years?
Last 17, actually. My first 10 were typical. I found my way through some stuff. I let go of some stuff, tried on some new stuff, but always held on to those elements of the past. You're in prison. It's putting that shell out. There's got to be consequences to actions with people. That's the kind of respect.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit touch and go in the first years. I also joked too. You can't tell it now, but I was fine, and that's not what you want to be when you first come to prison. So my first few years were rough. I spent a lot of time in the hole, but there was an evolution of that stuff, and I had a series of epiphanies over the course of that time, and probably about 17 years when I first got involved with the NAACP, and I started speaking in spaces and getting a response, and I was like, let me really try this and see, because I'd never really fully tried doing the right thing. I'd always touch on it, be pretty good, and then get scared because there's a responsibility with being successful. I was good at being a failure, but being successful always felt like I was on the verge of falling.
Right? Yes, sir.
I don't know more.
Right. But that was the initial feeling. It's like, I don't know if this is going to work.
Right.
If the next step is going to be there for me to take. Right. Man, but as you're talking, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, like, imagining how your bit must have been as I'm thinking about mine, because you coming from Lansing and you the white dude.
Oh, ain't no doubt. With hair halfway down my back, dog. When I say I was fine, I was fine.
And you like the tough white dude, right?
Right.
So like, man, and that was a different time in the penitentiary. Because I came down in 2000.
Yeah.
That's when I went down.
I came down 10 years before that.
Exactly.
I came out in 90.
Exactly. So in the 90s, the penitentiary was probably wilder.
Oh, and I was in old 4 block. When that came through on my B prefix, they put me in old 4 block right after they just bushed the police.
Damn.
So yeah, it was both my bids were, kind of interesting in different ways. I watched a huge evolution just between my A and my B prefix, and then over the course of the first 3 years, prison changed, quite a bit.
Straight up.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
By the time you came in, there was a lot more, predominant gang activity and things like that. When I came down the first time, it really wasn't. There was, but not the same kind of gangs, and not the gang life that was brought from the streets. And then, especially once I started doing more positive things, I kind of navigated that in a different way because I was the guy who was doing positive things. So I was cool and all right with most everybody in every group. There was a time at MR where I had a couple people who, when they had beef on the floor, they'd bring me because I was neutral. But they also needed somebody to be able to kind of watch their back. in a situation. So I'd walk into some of these situations and they'd be like, no, what the hell is this white boy doing here? You know, but, you know, I was trusted.
Man, when was you at MR?
My first bit, I did almost my entire bit at MR. I would have left just before you got there.
Because I got there in late 2000.
I came back in 94 and left in 98. So I did pretty much
real
90, 91, went home from MR in 92. I almost spent my entire A prefix in the hole in SEG. And then I came back in 94.
I block still?
I was an I block for my A, because you know you'd come back and you'd go back to I2 for quarantine was where I'd go. So I'd keep coming there.
We went to G block. We went to the Graves. They was putting us.
No, the Graves were still the Graves.
Okay.
When I was there, when I came back on the second time, they had G Unit and they had the SDP program and stuff there. But the whole time that I was there on my second bit, I actually stayed out of the hole and I stayed J476.
I was J5.
Yeah, J476. I stayed there. Yep.
It's funny that you said that the gangs weren't like that when you came down.
Yeah.
But that they were more like that when I came down, because that's literally what I say about my time. Like, I ain't really, when I came down in 2000, gangs ain't had no real power on the yard. It was the religious groups with power.
Oh yeah, it was definitely that.
By the time I was leaving in 2015, gangs kind of still didn't have power, but they had like numbers.
Right.
They were like building a lot of numbers, but they didn't have the organization to have like any control over anything yet.
Right.
But I've been going almost 10 years. I'll be at my 10 years this summer, this August. I'll be at 10 years.
That's cool.
So, you know, I'm a little removed from what it looks like now. I get the phone calls and have conversations with people, and they're telling me how much more involved gang life is, though.
Yeah, because I think also
in what you say, 2020. What did it look like then?
I mean, it had and influence and power. Those things are all kind of subjective, and they're on a spectrum. So literally, when I came down in 90, there really weren't any real gang activities. I'm talking about the traditional gangs. It was a lot of the religious organizations, you know, and some of the other organizations too. But they started to become more. When I came back to MR, I remember, a little crazy. When I came back to MR in 1994, I was in Marquette for the year and a half prior to that. And I was working in the factory up there, so I made good money. So I came down with all the good stuff.
What is good money, bro? Because like our listeners are thinking, you made good money. We're talking good prison money.
So prison standards. I think I'd actually got up to like 65 cents an hour or something like that. But I also had good money because of the fact that they still had bonuses at Marquette. So I'd make a few $100s every month, which was a big deal.
You could take care of yourself.
Oh, and stuff wasn't that expensive back then. You know, $75 a draw at the time, you know.
You was essentially balling off factory.
I was balling. So I come down and I got all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that I had is I had long hair and stuff, so I had a lot of bandanas. I had like 15, 16 different bandanas. And your family could still send stuff to you at times. So I'd have people that go on vacation and they'd send them to me. So I remember walking out on the yard when I first got there, and I'm walking, and they've got this guy hemmed up in the corner who's got a bandana on, and they talk about what you represent, homie, you know what I'm saying, blah, blah, blah. And so I went in, and I put every bandana I had in my foot locker on the next day when I came out the yard. And I all of them. I got them around my arm. I got them around my leg. I got them on my head. I got them everything. And I walked the yard the whole time, basically talking about I wish it would.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I walked the yard the whole time. Never had a problem. Never had a problem.
I probably thought you was a bug.
Oh, I was a little bit of a bug
to do that.
Yeah, but that was the whole mentality. Like I said, when there was a curfew on the west side of Lansing, that was the same thing I do. You know, guys would get jumped on a regular basis, and some of them were saying Dino's next. And I'd get messed up and walk the streets every night with a 5-pound dumbbell bar in my pocket. I mean, yeah, it was like, okay, run up on me if you want to. The first one's going to be brain damage at least.
So let me ask you this. What was the scariest thing that happened in prison? Like, not necessarily happened to you, but just the scariest thing, like, what messed you up?
On my A prefix, it changed the whole way that I looked at things, and I got messed up for trying to be, you know, Captain Save-A-Hole, but it freaked me out because I walked in. On my A prefix, I started out at MTU.
Okay.
And I went to MR because I tried to escape from MTU.
Oh, right, my God.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it made sense to me at the time. I was 19. What am I doing here? I just need to go. I wasn't thinking big picture.
I have a philosophy that, like, white people in prison have a feeling of entitlement to their freedom that black people don't.
Oh, I think absolutely. I think there's a lot of those things because it didn't even make sense. I was doing a 2 to 5. I'm doing a 2.5 to 5. You know what I'm saying? Because I wanted to go party. It was summertime, like you said.
To be free. I'm supposed to be free.
Sure, and like, and the entitlement. I speak to this a lot of times too, because there's a lot of people who will be like, "Well, I had a rough life. I didn't." No, because I understand this. I might have grew up in a neighborhood that being white wasn't necessarily an advantage, but every time I left that neighborhood, I was a white male in America. Mm-hmm. That is real, and so it does affect the way that you look at that. But the thing that really kind of affected me was not that. It wasn't the escape attempt. It was walking up into, when you started out at MTU at that time, they had us in the gym. And I'd already been to the hole like 4 or 5 times at this point in time because it's just the way it was. And everything was a threat to me. So I'd come back to the gym every time. And you only go to the hole for about 7 days.
Oh, yeah, MTU?
Yeah. So you get hurt on everything. They put you back in. They put you in and around sanctions and stuff. And so you come back to basically all the same people. And I'm hard-headed. So, but I walked into the bathroom one day and they had the big group shower, and they had this dude airplaned out, just gang raping him. And I mean, rough, raw dog raping. And I didn't even think. If I remember right, there was one of the guys who I'd already been into it with at one point in time, and I just ran up in there and just started throwing blows. They literally dropped him. They had him up in the air. They literally dropped him. He scurried off into the corner, and they're beating the brakes off me. Somebody says, "One time." So they all take off. I pull all my stuff off and just get in the shower like I'm taking a shower. But I remember that, like, because I mean, that was real. You hear about it. You know, I had family who'd been and to tell me about things, but when you witness it, when you witness the brutality of it, you know, that ain't got
my listening audience. When he said airplaned out, he basically is saying they had him lifted where he wasn't touching the ground.
Yeah.
They had his arms, legs, everything where he was up in the air, and they was having their way with him.
Yeah, and so that really set a lot of things. I've always had a little bit of wanting to help the underdog, probably because I've always felt like it. But that also changed the way that I kind of looked at how I would help people, because it slowly evolved. I would inject myself into dangerous situations a lot of times, and after a while, I realized that's not the way to save people.
Right.
Because I'm injecting myself into dangerous situations that I have learned how to avoid. And many of them, I would save them from a situation.
And they get right back into it.
They get right back into it. Or at MR, a lot of times, I would loan somebody some money so that they could take care of their business. And I'd even give a couple draws where I'm not going to put no interest on it. And then they'd lock up on me. Man, you just owed everybody. And I took
all of that off.
Right. So my evolution.
That kind of answers a little bit about how you did your bit. So you was a hustler, you was a stowman.
Oh, ain't no doubt. I was a little bit of everything early on, because I ain't no dummy. So I'd find ways. I knew who was doing what, and I'd find ways to make it more efficient. Work with it. You know, I helped people who were smuggling things in. You know, I did loans.
Man, I remember the stamp loans. I remember coming to the joint. I came down. I went straight to MR.
Right.
So when I got to MR, you get there, you need to get everything. Send me $1,500 to my account so I can get my TV and all of that stuff. But right now, I don't got no food. I don't got nothing.
Right.
Let me send this guy $50 and get $100 worth of stamps so I can buy me what I need to buy me. That was a time. Like, it's funny to talk about prison, the good old days of prison, right?
Right.
And
people don't get that, but it was true.
It was true. It was a different time of existence. So what's the biggest lesson you learned from inside?
And I tell my wife this on a regular basis, that people are the most disgusting and amazing creatures, all wrapped into one. We have a tendency as people to really want to put things in a box and categorize them. And it's easier, and society does it with us, the way they demonize us, like you've done something. Well, yeah, you've done some stuff too. The only difference is mine's documented,
right?
But I started to understand, and I started to, meet some people in there that were complicated, and they had predatory behaviors, but they were also pretty deep individuals who had some really good insights into things and were helpful in other situations. You're never, I think it's Lemony Snicket or something that says, people are never one thing. And I really learned that in there. But I also realized that it's not only what you're committed to that defines who you are, it's what are you committed against. Because until I stopped straddling the fence about doing good and holding on to some of my old ways, I couldn't really do good, and people saw that too. My last 17 years of my bid, I served as an example.
But why the change? What was the thing that made it click? Like, what was the toughest thing you had to overcome in there?
I had to overcome a lot, and especially in the big part of turning my life around and really committing to doing the right thing. So really quickly, I'd started doing positive things. I was involved with NAACP. I was involved with, a few different organizations. And it felt good to be, productive and a part of something. But I was also doing stuff on the side that was still illegal. And some of it involved, checks. And I had a moment, it's kind of funny, I was still smoking weed at the time, which was the last thing that I let go of, because my recovery started in 97 when I stopped drinking, and slowly I would, peel one more thing off where I'd do it. Weed was the last thing I was smoking, but I remember I was smoking a joint, and I was thinking to myself, you're doing all these good things, and you're doing them for the right reasons. But you're relying on old tools to do this. You're never going to round the corner unless you put those old tools down and figure out how to use some new ones. And so I decided that it wasn't enough for me to just stop what I was doing and let it run its course, because I still had some checks that were going to show up. And I told on myself. I never told on myself in my life. Like I said, nolo contendere on the plea. Took my bank robbery to trial. He never told on nobody, including myself. And I went to the inspector, and I said, "This is what I've got going on. I don't want no parts of it, no more. And this is why I'm telling you, so that I can't just open that door back up, and I can't get the fruits of that labor." Well, this guy decided that he was going to make a name on this and make it sound like he had discovered this. Went and told the administration, reported it to the FBI, the IRS, rode me out to another facility, and they took all my stuff. They brought most of it back, but like all my address books never came back, things like that. And It was at that point in time that it was going to be really easy for me to say, see, doing this right stuff don't pay off, it don't work.
Right.
But I had, again, another one of those moments where they're like God moments.
Okay.
Where it was like, no, man, you ain't tried this yet. And it was almost like the devil is scared of you. So he didn't waste no time questioning this and see if you were going to do this. And I was like, you got to give this some time to figure out whether or not this is real and whether or not you really, and I did. The more momentum I got. And the crazy part about it is everything that got thrown against me was not just taking my stuff, everything. That would have been fine. It was the straw that broke the camel's back with my family. My mom didn't talk to me for the next 17 years. One of my sisters still don't talk to me.
Because you still in there messing around? You still in there fucking off?
Yeah, 10 years after I go down, when they think they're safe, here comes police to their door. You know? And I've always had to do things the hard way. So it was almost like the world was like, here, this is the only way you're going to learn this lesson, and you have to do it under the most difficult circumstances. And it worked. And then it happened again just before I came home. I was supposed to come home in 2018, not 2020. The judge didn't understand how the habitual worked, and she said, I'm not going to change the sentence, because she thought that's what she was doing by allowing me to get my disciplinary credits. So I had to go back in, and she wanted me to do 4.5 more years. But I fought it, and I was right. Matter of fact, it's a published opinion.
Okay.
And they actually let me out 2 years later. But again, I'm riding back in the van. Even the police are like, man, she screwed you. You know they don't do that, you know?
Right.
And I came back to Saginaw, and I'm distraught. I don't know what to do. I come back. It's count time. Sitting on my bunk after I get done with count.
You was a Saginaw level 2?
Yes. No, I was at Saginaw level 1 at that time. I have been at Saginaw level 4.
Yeah, I was at 600.
I helped open
up 600.
I opened up 2.
Okay.
I was gone before they got to 5.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'd come from Adrian. But that after count had cleared, I'm like, what do I do? And I'm like, I got a class to teach. Because I was clean. That's who I am. You know? And all of a sudden stuff started to clarify a little bit. It was like, no more throwing my hands up because things didn't pan out the way. It doesn't have anything to do with the way things pan out. I am who I am, no matter the circumstances, no matter the situation. I went and taught my class. I felt better. I still felt terrible. Crap, I got 4.5 more years to go. I had my family in the courtroom for this hearing. You've been in the courtroom.
I also been back on appeal in the courtroom and didn't get the...
Yeah, and you see that, and when you go to trial, there's defense on one side, that your supporters are here, and the prosecution supporters are behind them. When you come in on an appeal, it's only your people. And they're all sitting huddled up in one spot. And I had a flashback to 25 years before about how many people I'd hurt. But I thought I was going to get action. Now I don't get action. Now everybody's pissed. I'm watching people cry. My grandma's pissed. I can hear her mumbling what just happened. My brother almost gets arrested because he cusses walking out the door. What the? You know what I'm saying? And they go out there and surround him. And I'm like, here I am victimizing people.
Man,
25 years later. So it was just another example of, no, man, you can't do any of this no more. When this is done, this has got to be done. And it's done.
I respect that. I didn't stop the way that you stopped in the penitentiary. I was probably up to my last year. I was like a core member of CFL. I was at Jackson, Cooper Street, JCS. And I still was probably getting an ounce of weed a week.
Right.
Every Monday getting dropped off to me, and an ounce of tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we got caught up. I never got caught, but everybody got caught up, and I was like, no.
Right.
Oh, you gotta stop, bro. You finna go home. What are you doing?
Right.
I had got comfortable in the idea that I'm not actually doing anything You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I was able to obfuscate the idea of what I was doing not being technically criminal.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's more just overseeing what's
Stupid
happening.
rule.
Stupid rule, right?
Right. I had plenty of those stupid rules.
Man, that was I specifically appreciate the re-victimizing, because I hadn't even thought about empathizing from that perspective. Like, going through that whole process,
Yeah.
they had to go through it.
Yeah.
Kind of personal question, you can answer if you want to or not. Was grandma able to see you come home?
This is another example of how the devil, however you want to describe that, will throw everything at you to see whether or not you really, about that life. My grandma got to hear that I was coming home. She actually, because I didn't tell anybody. When I won my appeal, I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to re-victimize anybody if anything fell through. So I let everything play out. So my brother goes to visit my grandma in hospice. Grandma's a little bit loopy. I mean, she's been, going through some stuff. She's not doing well. And she tells him, Adam's coming home. My brother's like, okay, Grandma, whatever. Everybody knew my out date was supposed to be like 3 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brother didn't find out until like the day before I came home. My grandma passed away 6 days before I got home.
Really?
6 days. But, quick story. The day after I got home was her memorial. So I got to go to that, got to heal some family relationships that had been, hurt there. After we did the memorial, I went to hospice to pick up some of her things that were still there. And so when I come in and I say I'm here, my grandmother was Arliss Pantal. And I said, I'm Adam. Their faces lit up. And there was my mom with my wife. They said, we used to read your letters to your grandma all the time. And she used to tell, us about you.
That's dope.
And so I was like, okay. And I also understood that, like, if you really go back into the way that, sometimes we get caught up in the way that we do things now, but the history of things, like a lot of times in some, tribal cultures, the elders, when they knew that their time was coming, and they would walk off into the woods, never to be seen again, because they weren't trying to burden the people who were going to have to try and take care of them and everything else. My grandma walked off into the woods for me because she knew that I would have dedicated every day of my life until she passed to her, and she wanted me to be able to put my life together and live the life that I'm living now. So she did that as she got to see what she wanted to see. She saw me change my life. She knew I was coming home, and she knew I was in good hands.
That was dope. Oh, man. I lost both of my great grandmas like within my last year in the penitentiary. And they both, whenever I'd spoken to them, first and foremost, they didn't do prison, right?
Right.
But I was both of their first grandchild.
Me too.
And they both managed to make it up to a prison to see me. And they both, whenever we spoke, they would say that they were staying alive, waiting for me to get here.
Yeah.
Like I said, I lost them within a year apart, and it was like my last year or two in prison. But man, that story about your grandma just helped comfort me in the way that I felt about not seeing them. Because when I came home from prison, everything was different.
Right.
Nothing made sense.
Right. It was nothing like when you left.
Nothing like when I left.
My dad passed away while I was in there too, unexpectedly. Dad passed away at he would have been 63-ish. I'm trying to remember. I can't do the math, but he died in his sleep. 2 weeks before that, him and my grandma had come up to see me, and just random, we're having conversations. He starts telling me how proud he is of me.
Wow.
Now I'm sitting in prison, you know, with 7-8 years left to do. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I was doing good
You're
things.
doing good things, yeah.
But he told me how proud he was. It was almost like he knew this was the last time that he was going to see me. And it was just like, there's these weird things to be comforted, you know, with.
Yes,
It changed because when I lost grandparents early in my incarceration, I lost them both on my mom's side. And nobody told me about when my grandma died first. And they were all afraid of how I would respond. Well, we didn't want to tell you this because we didn't want you nutting up
all the time.
You know? But like I realized I had a moment of clarity. I had a bunch of moments of clarity. And I said, but you all got to grieve together.
I have to grieve alone.
And so the next grandparent who died, my other grandma, the one who passed away 6 days before I came home, wouldn't let me be forgotten. She was following. She made sure I had flowers there to remind everybody. And I was able to grieve.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, right. It's as if they don't realize that they're going to have to tell you anyway.
You're not going
to. It's not going to be better today than it will be next year or whenever you think is going to be the right time to tell me.
There is no right time.
So just tell me. Like, let me.
Yeah.
Right. Agree. So jumping back forward, man. Let's get up out the penitentiary.
Let's get up out of it.
Man, welcome back home. We just crossed your 5-year anniversary for being home. 3 years parole.
That's right.
Parole.
Today.
So that means, that's today.
Today is the 3-year anniversary of our parole.
Actual free man.
That's right.
Right? Because the name of the podcast is 17 Winners. I did 15 inside, 2 years on parole. I wasn't free in those 2 years.
No.
At any time. People don't understand when they think that you got out of prison that you're free.
Right. No.
But you can literally just be sent back to prison. I was sentenced to 16 to 40 years, 192 months to 40 years. Just because I had done 15 inside and let out on parole didn't mean that 40 years wasn't still hovering above my life. So it's not until you get off of that parole and off of that paperwork that you become an actual free man.
No doubt.
How do you feel?
It felt real good enough. I think just arbitrarily I decided that I think I took my wife to this nice kind of little resort area. It's only in Ohio. But this is something that people can't even understand. So for this whole time that I was on parole, I've been driving around. I understand Google Maps. It gets me everywhere. You know what I didn't know? It welcomes you to a new state. So when I drove across the border for the first time, because I could cross the border and go into another state,
right?
It's like, welcome to Ohio. And I was like, what? You know? It was just, those kind of things are kind of like surreal sometimes because you take them for granted. I didn't feel a lot of gravity from my parole, but again, I think that also might be a little bit of the privilege and a little bit of, I mean, I'm driving around in America again as a white male. I mean, it's different. I had levels of it. So when I first came out and I first got my driver's license, didn't go over 75. You know, matter of fact, I think went to 73. And I used to even set my cruise control and school zones and stuff like that at 35.
I make sure you don't. I do that still to this day.
And as I got towards the end of my parole, I'm like 75, 77. And then I got off parole and it's like 83. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because I can do this. I can take the ticket. It's not the end of the world.
True.
I don't have the same reaction.
Now I don't worry about getting pulled over. Like, I ain't tripping about getting pulled over. I still have the habit of like setting my
right. It's not a bad habit to be in. 80, I got a bad habit. 83
not necessarily.
That's 13 over. That's a serious ticket if they want to write.
Yeah, but no, I don't fear getting pulled over for real. I ain't doing nothing.
I don't either, and a lot of times, I mean, that's the cool thing too. Is I think part of it was I was gone for so long that sirens didn't hit me the same way when I came home. It used to be. I mean, sirens would hit, boop, everything's like,
man, I got to.
Yeah, what's up? We used to practice running from the cops in the park. We would set fires and stuff, and then just bust up on them. You know, so that instinct doesn't go away. long, but I hadn't heard sirens in so long.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the freedom feels good to be able to, me and Q just, I had a conference for, cities and counties for fines and fees justice. I know that's a mouthful, CCFF&J. And they had their boot camp for the next cohort of people. And they wanted me to come down and speak about my experience and the importance of having people with lived experience in the room talking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we'd already had a retreat for our staff in Northport, Michigan, which is all the way up in the Pinky in the Leelanau Peninsula, scheduled for like a day and a half after this conference. So I could not get flights to match up. So Q and I drove all the way to Santa Fe, Mexico, arrived the morning of the conference. Yeah. And I get car sick. So I drove 19 out of the 23 hours, went down there, did the conference, drove back up where I drove like 21 out of the 22 hours, and then got a couple hours of sleep. And then we drove up to Northport with everybody.
Wow.
But that was freedom.
Yeah.
I can do this. We rented a car. We went down there. We did it. We took care of our business. Didn't have to ask anybody. Didn't have to check in when you get into the next state.
Right.
Could do it how I want. I could have flown back if I wanted to. And left. You know, it was just.
Yes, sir.
Those are things that you know you have.
Yeah.
And to this day, where you still have surreal moments at times where you're like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
for sure. I mean, if I'm being honest, the job that I do now is surreal. I'm literally doing what I would be doing anyway. I mean, helping to end this thing called mass incarceration.
No doubt.
It matters to me.
No doubt.
You feel me? So sometimes I wake up like, shit, I don't have to get up and go to nobody's job. Like,
right.
I am the job. You know what I mean?
Interesting story. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead on this, but this is an interesting, and it's a good segue with this.
Okay.
So like the work finds you when you're doing what you need to do. When we were so busy and we were on nonsense, our destiny couldn't find us because we were never where we were supposed to be.
Right.
This job found me, literally. I did not seek this job. I was not looking for a job. I thought I was going to be a lifer at Home and New Vision because they'd taken a chance on me, and I knew I was going to have opportunities to elevate there. And the executive directorship at A Brighter Way came up, and I was one of the few candidates that they were looking at because of the work that I was doing everywhere else, that I was showing up. So literally it came to me instead of me having to find it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just a realization that it's like, if you are where you're supposed to be,
you get what you're supposed to get.
Ain't no doubt.
And I guess that is a good segue, because my next question was, what were some of your challenges in transitioning and coming home? Housing, job, transportation, family, reunification, etc. Like, what were some of the things that you dealt with?
I was blessed in a lot of those areas, and so I got like really, I mean, I had most of my hard challenges in prison with having to stay for 2+ more years and stuff like that. So my transition started well before that. When I came home, I was pretty blessed. My wife was prepared for it. She actually was able to get a second car. I had a car as soon as I got my license. You know, can't beat that. Most people don't get that. I understand. But she also knew that I had a destiny, and she was trying to help empower that. My family and friends, my mother-in-law started what she called the cookie fund for me, which every time she wanted to buy some cookies, she put the money for the cookies in a jar. Now remember, I stayed an extra 2 years. That cookie fund was $700 when I came home.
That's crazy. She was disciplining herself, and she was looking out
to take care of me. And so, like, I had some advantages, but I also got tastes of other things. We tried to move into the apartment above my mother-in-law so we could be closer to take care of her. She's 87 years old now, you know, still living in her own place, but the apartment above her came open. And I think the timing of it was either I was the Jackson Area Recovery Community Coordinator, which is a supervisory position. I'd been working on my credit from the day I came home, so I had a 780 credit score. And my wife put in the application, got approved, and they said, all we need to do, and we'd already told them about my record. They said, but we need him to put in his paperwork. And put in the paperwork. She'd already got a welcome letter. A half hour later, they said, nope. Didn't matter if we paid it in advance. It didn't matter what was going on because of my history. Part of the history with me is I think it's not just that you have a record. I think that when they see you've done that much time, they're like, we know our systems don't work. Something's got to be messed up in here. You know? And I think there's a portion of that they can't possibly wrap their mind around. They know a system is broken.
But how do you quantify that? Because, I mean, we're a little off subject, but the reality is I've recently dealt with it. Like, me and my fiance, I own a house here on the north side, right? So I'm not worried about where to stay realistically.
Right.
At the same time, we're looking for a bigger place. I got 2 toddlers that need more room to run around when it's cold and we can't go outside, right? So we're looking and we're looking. We got the money. I got the credit score. But everybody's like, yeah, that armed robbery and that gun record.
Right.
We don't, like, since when does me being violent have anything to do with me paying you your rent?
Yeah, the other thing about it too is so I always hear this sorry ass excuse of, you know, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. How far do you got to pull into my past though
to see?
I've done far more good in the course of my life now than I've done bad. You know.
So what are you gauging?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is that humans have a tendency to this crabs in a bucket mentality anyway, and some of them really feel bad about themselves. And the only way that they can feel better is to have somebody else that's lowlier than them. So that's how they do is they turn these things in their mind. I mean, they're miserable in a lot of ways. And how dare you ever be successful and strive for something more after you've done something so heinous?
Right.
You know?
Yes, sir.
And it's crazy. And the other thing too, and I don't want to go too far down this because this would be a whole other show. Is the problem with
call you for it?
Yeah. Part of the problem with the housing situation is that we've monetized housing. We've forgotten that it created generational wealth. We talk about it being an income thing when we're talking about white America and then building a portfolio. But then we don't want to get to the generational income actuality and the equity side of it. So we want to talk about one side of it being, well, this is how you create wealth in America. How are we creating wealth on rental property incomes? And so it's just become another way that people who had the generational wealth can turn that into another one who are not. And now they're saying, no, we don't have the inventory to let you in. And you have got that nasty armed robbery. You know, it's like, it's all these different ways. I always say all the time that the language thing is important because when we talk about offenders and convicts and stuff like that, we all know the word, and I'm not going to say words, the word many people want to use instead. Since they can't use it anymore, they've put these other ones out there that are okay to use, but we know what the hell you mean.
Yeah, gotcha. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So with that, and you talking about your transition being home, coming home being, I guess, not as challenging as other people's. Sure. Because mine was saying I didn't have as many challenges. Housing has been a challenge for me, right? But employment, I've been killing it with that. I've been good with like my transition stuff, right? But you also are the executive director of A Brighter Way, which the organization is here for reentry.
And employees.
So talk a little bit about that.
It's a big philosophy. Aaron Suganuma, kind of started this in 2016. Melvin Parsons was a part of it. Cozine took it to another level. with his leadership, and kind of created these, opportunities for me to kind of come in. And I was the right person at the right time with the right philosophy. So we came on with this idea of reentry through relationship, because everything happens through relationship. We are pretty steadfast in our values. That doesn't mean that we won't ever hire somebody who's not formally incarcerated, because we will, because I'm looking at the homeboy model out in Los Angeles, and I'm starting to really pull some ideas from that are actually brilliant. I want to do something like that.
I would like to go out there and check out their whole thing.
They do a thing every year, man. If you can do it, you might be able to do it through MJF. You might be able to get them to send you out for my semi. But it was awesome. I went last year. But this idea that it's not only that we are best suited to do some of these positions where we're inside, we have that mindset. I keep myself tapped into it because I've been home for 5 years now, but the people that I work with on a regular basis, I genuinely find out what's going on, what are their challenges. Because you still hear some people talking about ID. ID is a thing, but ID ain't the thing that it was in the past. So it doesn't even really need to be thrown into the mix. It needs to be thrown into the legislative mix to make sure that it's protected.
Right.
But as far as the reentry services itself, we're not dealing with a lot of that, and it's a lot easier to deal with it when we only have 1 or 2 people coming in as opposed to 15 or 20 that need it. But this idea that we're an asset. And I think when I came into this field, I think we were getting a lot of lip service. There was a lot of things that was coming out. I can't even imagine being in it 15 years ago, where it was a completely different thing. There was a lot of lip service being done. Oh yes, we respect, lived experience. Meanwhile, they were giving you a Starbucks, gift card,
Right.
and stuff like that, or a gas card to get to something while we're touching on traumatic things. If an engineer's been working as an engineer for 27 years, nobody's going to give him a gift card to come and consult. And there's no trauma associated with his engineering degree. So one of the things that I really wanted to do and have really been a proponent for is the idea of, we bring value. Everybody's experience is valuable, but ours is valuable in a unique set of ways. I can train you up on all the things that engineer does. Can't train him up on all the things you've experienced. That right there should let people know how valuable that is. And so that's one of the things that we do at A Brighter Way, and we try and lead by example. The name lends itself to being as corny as possible, and I do it all the time because I say, well, we need everybody's light to make a brighter way.
Shut up.
Things like that. We do. It works, but it's absolutely true. And so the other thing too is sometimes in these spaces, we have a tendency to devalue the experiences of others who've never had the same experiences as us.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing about it is if you've never been incarcerated, you don't know what it's like to do the 30 plus years that I've done. But if you've never been incarcerated, I don't know what it's like to live my whole life out here.
Because that's a challenge in and of itself. I think about my time out here like, okay, once I get to the 15-year mark, I'll damn near be even.
Right.
Understanding how life goes inside
Right.
versus outside.
Yep.
Like outside of that, it's hard to even imagine living the same life for 25 years or living out here for 25 years.
And they learned something. We learned how to navigate inside. We're learning how to navigate outside. They've learned how to navigate outside for a long period of time, over generations sometimes. So there's value to it. But I mean, I think we talked about whether or not, sometimes when we share our story, if it touches on traumas. I've done the work, so it doesn't hit it in a way that is painful at all.
Right.
But part of the reason I've done the work is because I know how painful it is for some people. So part of my job is to share my story so they don't have to.
For sure. So what's missing in reentry? Like what needs to be there?
Will. This is one
individual will.
Political will, all of those things. Because I think, like, I was sitting in a meeting not too long ago, and it was the Reentry Coalition for Washtenaw County. And we were talking about, well, obviously, because the same things come up on a regular basis. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs when you're talking about a lot of this stuff. But damn, let's take it to the next level. We never get past the first two layers of Maslow and what we're doing in reentry. So they were like, okay, well, housing and employment, obviously, those are the big two. What's the next one? I said, I won't necessarily disagree or agree that those are the big two. I said, the other thing that is always missing in that is hope. People come out and don't have a genuine hope. They don't necessarily believe they're going to be able to put their life together. They're always, the majority of people are figuring out how to make it good enough. How am I going to struggle less? How am I going to suffer less? It's always about mitigation. It does not have an aspirational tone to it. And this is what we're trying to bring to the spaces. This is aspirational. Not, if you come in, what do you want to do? I don't care if you don't have any money in your pocket. And you tell me that you want to do this great thing that's going to take tens of millions of dollars. How do we get there?
How do we get there? Let us help you start.
What's the first level of
There are steps from the beginning.
Ain't no doubt.
You need help from there.
And sometimes those things adjust. You talk about, like, one of my challenges is that I'm good at an interview. I was 30 for 30 at interviews, and every single one of them rescinded the offer for me for work. I always use this example. Blarney Castle Petroleum, the Shell gas stations around here, would not hire me because they did not trust me with $50 in the till. I have access to all of our accounts at ABW. I'm so grateful that they didn't trust me with $50 in the till. And I'd interviewed with the regional manager enough that we were kind of cool. And I said, you know, one of the things you might want to think about going forward is, so I said, I never got arrested for stealing from the till. I did armed robberies. So if I was still about that life,
I ain't doing no petty stealing. Straight up.
Right.
I got a acronym that I took from another podcast that I like. It's $1 Million Worth of Game with Gilly and Wallow.
Mm-hmm.
They use the word game, and they changed the acronym to guidance, attention, motivation, and education.
All right.
Any free game you want to drop to the listener?
I don't know if it's game, because it really don't seem like it. But the best game in town is the one you create. I walked out the doors and I knew one thing. I had one freaking product. That was me. I've never been a good salesman in something I don't believe in. So, because I tried to be a salesman, like late 80s, early 90s. I think when I came out on my A prefix, I tried. I was terrible because I did not believe in the product. So the game is, if you believe in the product, you don't need no game. You know, I mean, Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson, how long do you think it's going to take him to warm up and start knocking out some baskets when he gets on the court? Because he put in the work. He knows who he is. He will always be a baller. I got stuff around not because of the arrogance of anything else, but because I know it's true, and I didn't know it for the majority of my life. I'm a boss, flat out. And so that manifests itself in anything. I'm not even going to play a game that I know I ain't going to be good at. Why? You know?
I don't even do that. That ain't my thing.
No.
In my lane to do what I do well.
Ain't no doubt. Ain't no doubt. I don't need to master everything. But what I'm going to do is authentic. It's real. It's me. I'm not trying to be anything else. And sometimes people confuse that because they're so far from it. So sometimes, you know, in this space that sometimes people will just get to hate me because that's what they got to do. And it's like, I'm okay with that. If you hate me for who I actually am, then I'm good with that. Or like me for being something that I ain't. Yep.
Before we end the show, What should we be paying attention to in the fight to end mass incarceration in Michigan, from your perspective?
I don't know. It's a hard thing to speak to sometimes, because sometimes when you speak to these things, people take offense because you think you're talking about them, or you're challenging their way of doing business, which I'm not, because I know that you have to come. A problem this big, you can't come at it from one direction and in one way. Everybody has to come at it from a lot of different directions. But I would say we have to be careful of what those in power are willing to give us. Because if they're willing to give us something, they've already thought about how they're going to take it away later. It's the things that they don't know how to rescind that they really fight back against. And like giving people full rights, putting us into a protected class, things like that, they know that they can't pull those things back. And I'm going to use an example. And again, anybody who's listening, don't take this wrong. I think all of these fights have to be. The problem is sometimes when a fight happens, then a lot of resources